Lama Chöpa, in Mada, Dinelia, Lamalia, Sodeptiki, Shuitarche, that in Mazu, and Yamlenche, Rimbadi, Yamsola, Rimbadi, Garasaneda, and give Shin Tinsuda, then Dim, then Lobsang Rimba said, DJ, that give Shin to Kazanzo, Dineli Shuitarche. And that didn't ma. Karsaneda on Zugidi. Dan Yamlin Jebala, Tien Chabachin, Kuyan to Tien Chabachin, the Jugi, Ludin Seti, and this ma, and the Tien Chabachin was soon a decorma shugore.
Good evening. We're continuing to look at this text that of the Lama Chöpa. We finished a couple of weeks ago a substantial section wherein one was making supplications to the Lama after having reflected on his many good qualities and kindness and so forth. And now, having created and made those requests for the trainings to transform ourselves, we come to that actual section of that has been built up to this point, which is to receive instruction on how to transform our minds through cultivating cultivating all the levels of training to engage in to achieve enlightenment. So this is the section that we've come to now on page 15, the meditation on the graduated stages to enlightenment. Last week we looked at the first, which is the training in relation to our spiritual teacher. And tonight we'll come to the second in verse 85, looking at this precious human life that we've achieved, that's marked with freedoms and endowments.
아니 자당 저기 기회 신인 대서 검세되다 저기야 도 삼다야 되고다 기회 신인 당 저기다 등하서 라마 주변 냠는 제비갑을 있는다 저 초신 사다시 비게 라마 초신기 초신다 라마 뭐 예매도 선텔이야 삼베토네 안델라 대바 제지도 제제네 라마 템비기 템바이나 편연되는 요래 심비 삼다제네 남마 템바이나 아줄야 안직 최식의 메디 안최냐야라 만년나네 아주 신야요 말에 심비게 두스네 마템바이나 안 두스네 경험되는 거래삼 나는다 고미야 조디다 남이게 구송투수 연된 전비 토네 남마야라 대바제지도 제제 소소 대바제 곰대바 고미야다 안 남마디 라알야 아니 Getting Chimboyin, Sempige, Jin Jembe Tone, the Lamalia, and Gun Debu Loset, Namia, that Gijume, Sempige Duchine, and some Dagomedi, that gave Shin to Comba said, and go Shin you come to Suicide, come to Dinis, that some died the Gomia Dinirita, just at the Nigiton Dinigina, that Duchina Azuki, Jambatan Shijingi, the Jan Shijin Denje, Lami Kusun to you and then Jange, Lamala Deva Zeju, Jange, Mibadeja Gomiata. And Lamadela, Jinchamo, Gedinchimbo, Samdaja, Lamalia, Gondogo, Losite, Namia Gimachu, Gijume, Sempida, Jambata, Shijin, Denje, Duchina, some died the letter, Givishin, to Comba, comes to Tisigorda, the kissing of the DT Chusavache.
Before continuing with the text, it's useful to recap the point of meditation on reflecting on the spiritual teacher. So the section that we have been looking at and what we looked at in the preceding verse in a brief way last week. So the meditation has a number of stages, a number of steps. And the first is to reflect on the benefits of relying on a teacher and the faults of not doing so. And the benefits include that one comes to understand the Dharma, and secondly, learn how to integrate it through meditation, integrate it into our very way of thinking, and thereby create the causes for, at the very least, further good rebirths, life after life. Moreover, to create the causes to attain liberation and enlightenment itself. And the faults of not relying on a teacher are that all of this is not achieved. Thereafter, in the meditation, after reflecting on the benefits and faults of relying on a teacher, one reflects on his various qualities, and these are presented in detail in the preceding section, as well as the tremendous kindness that is shown us. And the purpose of reflecting on his qualities and kindness is so as to generate a mind of trust in him or faith in him. This is essential so that we become open and receptive to his teachings and his guidance. Then thirdly, the third section one looks at is to train the mind so as not to focus on faults and criticize him, but rather to focus on the vastly greater good qualities. And the way to then, one reflects on all of these, using the meditator's two indispensable friends of mindfulness and vigilant introspection, where one, with mindfulness, keeps one's mind on the topic, and with introspection ensures that one is staying on the topic, and thereby can investigate deeply. And also, with the second aspect of mindfulness, recalls the teachings one once had, so that one is able to analyze and investigate the various points that have just been mentioned. So that is what we've looked at most recently, how to rely on the spiritual teacher.
Gewishin Ding Gubi Gumzen Dena Pan Yobata and Madina Anzulia Jig Yongra Yuba sometime the Jevache sometime Jevacheta or do sometime that it Dambo do some that the commune de Carasena that Gewishin Yukusun to Yundan Jambi Tone Gewishin let Zichi do Rangi that Sojin said that she Lama no Yemen some tele Zichi do Misha Devazichi do Jana Jamba the Shishingi Danger Jamba Zichi do Jeji Duadilla. 대바제지도 제주 곰돼야 될다 곰세데 신주 곰세디래 디 마곰녀야 안다 지가 소리 당아서 템바 마티 템베 판연되는 용구래 제가 마템바는 아주 경험되는 라기 선배다 녀리디 제바시야 삼다지 삼다 사회되다 띵고와 인자 다시 되니 곰다 곰세디 아주 곰세디 제지도 내발로 제지도 내발 고고로와 제가 다 가르래 제지니 그러세네 that social certificate lama da ranging lam yem dele lama deba zidu jeje and dele jana jamba de xixin dianje deba zidu je de la gom deba de da du sine give xin zu gom se de gom ja se de dire da gom ja se de.
Just before I say what Genla said, I missed a point earlier. The very first point in the analytical meditation is to remind ourselves that so before reflecting on the benefits and faults of relying and not relying on a teacher, is to remind oneself that our Lama is indivisible from the merit fields that one has visualized right at the start of this practice. So now to come to what Genla has just said, the various points of the meditation from that second one, which is reflecting on the benefits of relying and the faults of not relying, then moving into recalling his qualities and kindness, and thereafter through generating trust. The third point, or now the fourth point, is to guard one's mind against seeing faults and rather focus on his many good qualities. So those processes there are analytical meditation, where one's taken the knowledge that one has gained in teachings and is investigating that, applying that reasoning, seeing its validity, and integrating it into our very way of thinking. The culmination of each meditation on this point, then, is with the arisal of stable faith or trust in our teacher. All those points of analysis, they serve to generate the stable trust in our teacher. So the stable trust is the result of the analysis. And the depth and stability of that trust or faith comes about in dependence on the depth and frequency of the analytical meditation that we do. Then each meditation session is primarily analytical meditation, but concludes with placement meditation, where one abides single-pointedly on the conclusion of the meditation, which in the context of relying on a spiritual teacher, concludes with stable trust or faith in our teacher. Seeing him, now we tie to the very first point in the analytical meditation, seeing him as indivisible in nature from the entire merit field. And this is where we place our mind, this feeling of trust, or this mind of faith that has arisen. We abide on that. We place our mind single-pointedly on that. And this is how each meditation concludes, and this is in the context of relying on a teacher. It ends with a placement meditation in this way, where we, through placing our mind on the resulting conclusion of the meditation, we strengthen our familiarity with this way of thinking. In other words, we strengthen our familiarity with a mind of deep trust in our teacher.
Dini zadang jugi dini ya nyamlen zo ini ya le de kargo sini dingi zin shine jugu worwa dingi zin shine juk dongbani deni dongbani mebe shine de komje deni ane nyomo papa tarba da tamji kimbe to ba to worwa 지난 dini za zo dangbo nyamlen jidu ne ko gewe shinin denzu gom je gomdu ne delya miba zechi de temba de shin denje lamalya Deba zechidu je lama la mine, deba zechidu je sem namyan shala mayo je, zechidu nyamba du sin gom du dinge zin zhen xixin de dinge zin zhubya la go zu wo de xine zhubya ge ko xine zhubya ge zhutang sung go ma de ine ya di gom bi ge dende gom yo de xine mango ba na xine zhubya la ping go de xine zhubya dinge zin zhen xixin de zechidu ne bu lo de zechidu ne gom gu yo ba za de san zechidu ne bu lo di ane gomba suigor dinin yana 신의 주의가 gomba suigor 다 된다라.
The point I have just made about the relationship between analytical and placement meditation I've mentioned several times over the years, but I want to emphasize it now because it's important that you utilize this in each of your meditation sessions. So I'll emphasize it by talking a little further about the importance, the benefits of this. So first, the meaning of the word meditation is that its synonyms are habituation or familiarization. So we familiarize ourselves with a topic. We become habituated to that topic so that it's integrated within us. That is the meaning of meditation. And so we do this through analysis, where we come to truly understand and have a way of thinking integrated within us. And we also do it through placement meditation, where when we have generated, in the context of the relying on the teacher, the mind of faith in him, we become habituated to this mind of faith in our teacher that we have generated through analysis. We become habituated to it by placement meditation, by abiding on this mind of faith. Now, why this is so important is because up to this point in the meditation, we've been doing analysis, so using minds of wisdom or intelligence. Now, we come to use the mind of concentration. And we've been using concentration too through mindfulness, but now this is the part that is emphasized. And this is important because, as is often said, all the Buddhist teachings are taught with the single purpose of leading us to cultivate wisdom. So too here. By focusing at the end of the meditation on placement meditation, we're strengthening our mind of concentration or meditative stabilization. And eventually, in our training, we'll come to the point where we put all our other meditation topics aside, because we have developed them so strongly within us, we are now ready to develop calm abiding, to focus on calm abiding. So I'm presenting how you do your meditation, whatever the topic is. In this context, relying on the teacher, it culminates with developing our mental factor of meditative stabilization or concentration. Then, eventually, when we've developed many good qualities within us, including a strong mind of trust in our teacher, we will have also developed our concentration substantially. And that will aid us in the culmination or the development of calm abiding, single-pointed concentration. And why that is so important, amongst the many reasons, is primarily because once we have developed calm abiding, we develop it a little further, and we develop meditative insight. And with the union of the two, calm abiding and meditative insight, our realization of emptiness becomes particularly powerful and transformative. And it's with such a powerful mind that we can actually come to realize emptiness directly and abandon completely our afflictions together with their seeds and attain liberation. That is the purpose of the Dharma, to attain liberation and even enlightenment. This requires the union of calm abiding meditative insight, and to achieve that, one needs many good qualities, like relying on Atisha, as well as strong concentration. So this is why I encourage you to do each of your meditation sessions, both with analytical and placement meditation. Now turning to the text, to verse 85. Please bless me to realize how this body of liberties and endowments is found but once, it's difficult to obtain, and is easily lost. And partake of its essence, make it worthwhile, undistracted by the meaningless affairs of this life. The meaning in brief here is that this body, this life that we have achieved, has come with an incredible potential. But this potential is unrecognized by almost everyone. So this verse here serves to introduce us to our potential, help us to come to recognize this incredible potential that this life presents. A physical basis is shared by the vast majority of beings, humans, animals, and so forth. But it's this human rebirth, and in particular within some, amongst all humans, only some have the kind of rebirth that is being referred to here, and that's in our first line: a body marked with liberties and endowments. So this, having liberties and endowments, is something not shared amongst even all humans.
Wongbo masa migya meba nawaya Matyopa rochina amcho wonbade migya masa niga meba rochina tene kwanzo nga jugi chue pa amcho nyenje chayaragi marwa tene kwanzo ya jigi mig meba za tene gi deplo je chayaragi marwa tene tene za desulya chue che gogapdi des gombara chagore 제가 다된 ngazo ongbo chasan changde banza tene ge kanga yo mare jere 제가 다 튕게 다야 저 자야통에 매바다 직 최근에 통해 강한 시부여변에 매바에 강한 한 뒤선에 한 중앙주 최제 냠네 제일 최최를 롭전시에 고갑들아 그라하고와 지난 되네게 매바자 되네게 요마치선 되네게 통해 튕긴데 야타주 여반자 최제하게 뒤수 여바래 지래 아디나제 다야 지금 최매사 롬바 제가 되네게 최근에 시간 최시간 메디간 되네게 사제로시나 소수기 최제 되어여바나 최장사여 말와 세상에서 롭전시가 되어여나 롭전시사게 제랍라로시메나 되네 롭전시라고 말와 디나시 당한저 최랍켄당 최매바이나 한 최시야 고브라고 말 다된 안솔이야 되네게 차상 여대바 인자 아니 다와레서 세상을 달와라베 맞아 최제 고업여바다 최제 뒤수여바 제상하는 저 류된디다다 최시에 고가여바다 최제비게 최제비 뒤수여바다 최제 고가여바 튕긴 차상 창두비 류된리샤 레스 월다.
This term liberties and endowments, or often translated, liberties is often translated as freedoms, and endowments also often translated as opportunities, have specific meanings. So there's a list of 8 liberties and 10 endowments. But to briefly describe what liberties or freedoms refers to, is that people such as ourselves have liberty, we have freedom, and what that means is we have the time, the opportunity, and the capacity to hear teachings on the Dharma and meditate on them. That is the freedom that we have, or the liberty that we have. Because, for example, some people are deaf or blind, and therefore they cannot hear teachings or read Dharma texts. There are others who have really difficult material conditions, and therefore their life is consumed with just sustaining themselves and trying to sustain their children. And there are others who have heard about the Dharma, have an interest in the Dharma, but they live in a place where the Dharma doesn't exist. They may wish to go to teachings, but they don't have access to teachings. Just like perhaps if someone wants to study a particular university course, but the universities that they can get into don't offer it. What can they do? But we have freedom. We have liberty in that we have the time, we have the opportunity, and we have the capacity to both hear teachings and meditate on them.
당한 저기 류딘데 랑아주 미 류딘데 여바사 미 류딘데 템빙한도 삼노땅하디 배 삼노디 10초고 쉬우시 땅 두고 그래지래 남아게 가르침 유메 마음바나 가르 간데시가 그 남주에디 뱀마세기 베주다디 류딜라 템빙이 남주 베주다디 쉬우용 거래서 진짜 남주에디 베주다완 땅베가도 류이고네 디카스고 지게 자와치 투야당 지난 류딘 델라 템베 삼로기 토안베 지 롭종 가르진다 롭종 휴치 투야게 지게 남주기 베시 휴치 땅 두고래 디네 장한 저기 류딘디 아니 지게 샨다 미다위 야보치리 예서월도나
Here this term we have as body really refers not so much to the physical basis, but the mind that is contained within that physical basis. This is what is quite extraordinary within human beings. And that we ourselves do not suffer from the lack of freedom or liberty of having a severe mental impediment, means that we have this incredible human intelligence, which in brief means we can think for ourselves, we can think deeply, which means we can hear profound teachings and we can understand them, or if we struggle to, through effort, repeatedly, we will come to understand them. And we can understand them through looking at their validity in relation to our own lived experience, as well as what we perceive around us. And in this way, we can come to understand some really remarkable and profound truths. This is what marks out the human rebirth as particularly phenomenal, this incredible intelligence and the capacity that comes with that.
자대게는 남을 풀어야게 계셔요. 안zul을 풀어야게 계셔요 말와. 냐대게는 추날 봐주이네 각직 줘야다는 직 그런저기 믹스 투모마에 병안zul에 투모마에 계셔야가를 여대로 와다. 이냥 안주 미 남주에나 dundu게 남징이 등 아주 미 남주에 다시 오지 켜봐도 파와 자살해. 제사다 나주기 미 남주에게 삼노다제네 남로 풀고 해야 되기 차상 풀투에 수고로 수여신의 풀 쇼고 매나야 남로 야 타오른 거 가지고 줘베네 조투에기 직 조투에기 탑시다 남주 수여제 안에 직 개합 판천 줘야다 안디 맞에 다유 종교가 줘야 돼 쇼고 이건서 가지 예배나 되네기 개합 지지를 봐 조사질 조투에 가고로 와 되네 제사 되네 자 남주 톤에 배치 아니 주강을 줘야기 주낭을 줘야 sa wall pa do sa gang do ya ji zang an ji mi di gi ga sen lung be je da ya sa be je da ya chu be je da me be je di gi be je da ne ang zo lo go ko tun ge shi wo ji du tu go lo gang di to ne gang mang wo shu se tu go lo ba 现在定安最米给三六个南州团的地界的地用过来，地界的三六的南州个好国话些，好国呢，的呢，这就是旅基，那个可苏北个别些大街，那推荐加拿大个车上住起来，他推荐加拿大、老些加拿大，杭州呀都是住呢，别些大土个的，第米个南州个日本个原点大，安尼米旅基原点第一团呢，南州个团呢旅基别些大街，的住土个吧。 但深圳顿着了，点那个可能做嘞，苏北个点那个去开学干的学呢，地嘛多南州必须当的苏北话呢，主推荐买了的，假如可是看长波这个就是学嘛的先，刚呀水推民多的，就是当然这个米呢，炒完一百卡完呢，炒了就昨天就学的，这个炒完修园呢，这正路学这事情就学的，俺点那个学了吧。 就是顿着了，今天谁还买了哇？啊，那样就实际就面呢，可能要买那点嘞，买到大东那些新大研究是别研究谁要了哇？咱买啥了？咱搭谁要了哇？顿着了，今天谁推还买了哇？刚刚见那第啥？地嘛都先可能就啥不带，南去别去带要么南去上面的口味呢，可是不有他那别去当推要买了哇？ 这咱当然就米里开始呢，但是咱南区别就修就别就大约对吧？去旅店的了，南区别就在旅店第一团呢，修主推呢。这咱啊，南区别就在旅店了，旅店的了的呢，南区别就大里个了哇。的呢，咱当然就两，现在米这一个米旅店的，俺开发的跑跑的，这咱的大瓦街上就是别嘛这个开发的跑早起么修起这下是我的。
So if we look at the world of seen beings, not the unseen but the seen beings, comparing humans to animals, certainly in terms of physical capacity, varying types of animals have qualities, physical qualities, that far exceed ourselves. Some in terms of speed, others in terms of strength, others in terms of flight, others in terms of capacity to remain underwater, as well as some mental qualities such as understanding direction in a way that we do not. But really, if we don't look at body, but we look at mind, in particular intelligence, here there is a vast difference where human beings as a class are vastly superior to the entire animal kingdom. Human beings are particularly adept at identifying problems, including subtle, unseen problems, and coming up with solutions. Also, human beings are particularly adept at looking for opportunities to improve their life as well as the lives of others, and then creating solutions to creating ways in which to fulfill these opportunities. We just need to look in our lifetimes at the advance in technology, the complete transformation of the world through technology in our lifetimes. It's really quite remarkable. And this has come about in dependence on human intelligence and our capacity to use our rather limited bodies to do incredible things. Here, if we compare ourselves to animals, there are those who can fly and we cannot. But with our intelligence and our capacity to use our bodies in incredible ways, we can fly further than any bird. We can fly to other continents, which they cannot do. And these days, a few people can fly even to outer space. We can go deeper in the oceans than any single fish. We can go also to the top of mountains. No, there's no single animal that can do all of this. So with this incredible intelligence, we've put this body to good use. Now tonight, the weather is particularly cold. So all of you, us too, wearing thick clothing, appropriate to this weather. We are sitting indoors. We have heating on. But we think of the animals outside. Well, the birds can puff themselves up a bit, but that's all. Kangaroos, well, perhaps They huddle a bit closer together in their mob. But that's all. They lack our intelligence, and they lack the capacity to use their body intelligently. And it's these differences that mark us out, mark this life that we have out, as so valuable, so precious, because of what this incredible human intelligence is capable of.
나 체디기 삼다미나 데네기 줍투야기 맞아 삼남지 베셰 땅 류기 데네기 베셰 지글야가 레젠 두스치나네 줍투야기 나라들에 여디바데 나데 체디기 좀 마인바다 개와 치마 삼다미나 땅안저 개와 치마 하다 미 류딘 토야기 류딘 야보 토야기 대야 나저기 체텔리아 나저기 류딘 델리아 삼나땅 곰 아니 주고 구스 냠는 제바이나 안 개와 치마이나야 하다 미 류딘 야보 토투야 안 류딘 토와티 덴델라야 안 대유양야 주투야 주여데 류딘 델라티네 나저기 미 류딘 델라티네 나저 삼르리바 베제 땅 안에 되네 류딘 델라 두스나 곰제네 개와 치마이나야 하다 미고 바 토투야 안디마세 안지가 저기 남주의 삼르 베제 땅 되네 나저 류딘 델라야 안 지게 지 묘모바 차사 방제 탈바다 탐지기 탈비고 봐 톱투야 안에 샘제 탐지기 팸버 줍시에 안에 사이기 고봐 톱투야 지산당 안 주기 류딘 딘 델이야 개와 치마 하다 미고 고봐 톱투야기 아니 튕긴 차상 안 주다데 류딘 델이야 아주 삼리티 단에 삼리토네 류딘 델이야 줍투고래 다 탈바 묘모바 차선아 빠디 띵이 되와 탈비고 토야 돼야 아주 리딘 될 때네 안에 곰지네 삼리 곰지네 안 두고 그래 다딘 샘전 탐지게 된다라 팸부 두야게 된다라 안 산지고 토야 돼야 아주 리딘 될이야 삼노 땅에 토네 안 곰겨지도 두고 그래 세상 아주 리딘 될라 때네 될이야 아주 남주 리버디 삼로디 베제 땅 리딘 데이텐 될이야 베제 땅 곰바이나 체대당 개와 치마당 안탈바당 안탐지 kimbe고 뭐 토야기 차상 루투고 어레스 지산 아주 리딘델 루투고 둔리기 리딘델 데네 루투야 말레스 루투야고요 말레스 제가 매반자다 데네 상 아주 리딘데 베마시기 베주에 첨보지다 리딘델 데베 남주 베주에 따니 루투고자 리딘 디디 나 델레텔야 안지 쇼직 된다 첨보 루투고에 된 켜바전데 레디오 차도요. 그래서 자당 한줄에 되니기 띵 해봤는데 되니지 요래서 이제 두스는 대슈기 띵 세팅 한줄이야 두스 모르는 거로 와다.
What I've presented thus far, all of us have the intelligence to understand this is true. We can think about our own lived experience as well as what we perceive around us, and we can see that it's true. And as human beings, not only can we do that, but as human beings, we have the capacity to think beyond this life and to think about our future lives. So we can also have the capacity to recognize that the reason we have the life we do and not something completely different is because of causes that have been accumulated, that we accumulated in past lives. And therefore, we, through identifying those causes, have the capacity to not just identify them, but focus on accumulating them again to ensure that in our future lives we have a rebirth as similar to this one. And moreover, we have the capacity to hear teachings and reflect on their meaning, and thereby identify the breadth of suffering in samsara, seeing that there is no essence anywhere in samsara. And all this suffering comes from one root cause. But this root cause we can also, through study, come to recognize it has an antidote. And that antidote, a mind of wisdom, is something that we all have the capacity to develop. And through developing it, we can gain freedom from suffering in its entirety. This is something we can all do. Not only do we have the capacity to understand these teachings, but we have the capacity to develop such teachings within us and gain freedom from suffering. And moreover, we have the capacity to understand the teachings that present this in a broader context, recognizing that each and every being is suffering in a vast variety of ways that we've come to identify. And they too are suffering for the same reason, and they too will benefit from coming to understand and cultivate themselves the same antidote that we are cultivating. So therefore, we can commit to striving for enlightenment so that we can become completely liberated ourselves and help others to attain the same state of liberation. So in this way, with this basis of this human life, particularly this mental capacity, we have the ideal opportunity to accumulate the causes for liberation from suffering and enlightenment itself, and thereby be of truly remarkable benefit in the lives of others. No other being can do this. Certainly no other being in that we have ever perceived. No being has the quality of situation that we do. And what I've presented here is something that isn't readily visible or obvious to us. It's not how we perceive our life. But through reflection, we can come to recognize how true this is. So hearing these teachings, then meditating on them, is transformative. Realize the incredible potential that we all possess.
dan digi gar sungor sene nga zu luden di cheje dine yores jesan chedeli ne an du su che tu yagi nga zu samna ta ya da luden digi beje ta tu yagi cheje dine yore kewa chima da tarba da tamje kimbe go ba tobde chaza an di dendela tobde dine che tu gi nyuba da cheje dine gi luden ji yores da luden di be masigi beje chembo ji da nyuba chembo shu ji ga zu luden di di yores yobi keshu shedu ta nga zule di nga zule yodi barwa sina di za chimbu wa da de ben beju denig imba de za chimbu imba de sosorana du chene samda hago de o da lüding nga zu lüding di ta beje shu yode ga da bang ne da ne ge chimbu shu shedu wa san be samlo ko wa denigi 다들 되게 양아도 두스나 삼는 거 있어라다 되네게다 류딘 데라 먼저 미들린 데데 제투가 삼는 데데 다도 안에시 둔조에 데데 데네 민도아 선배게다 둔조 류딘 당아 주게다 둔조레 직자 마라 직게라 첨부 안에 지 왕탕 첨부 생게라서 다라서 바다 랑보셔라서 바다 되네게 직다 망부 예변나네 되네게 나네 당 류딘 파 두려도 만서 류딘디 되게 가리는 제네 제투가 받체데라 삼다베나 제가 딜레팀에 남주 가르드네 베제다 개와 쳔마 탈바다 탐제기 보고부터 제가 디네 자당한 류딘 베 야고 휴시에도 와 선배 섬도 아주 젤랄 마스는 뿌이다고 야고지 자진 버려서 선배 삼명도 디다고 얘기 아주 차상라 네 되기기로 dumbe기로 아디디 야고 다고지 마잔데다 베레 게지 물에 선배게 자진 무지네 제가 당한 저기 자진 뭐 다고 잡아 나시다 류딘디 디네게 자진 무임 송여도 류딘 딩한테 배 직사치 뭔가 되네기 꼼데 하는 아주 배시 약고 땅고 그래서 다들 배시 땅나 땅투에 여봐서 배시 땅고 그래서 배 다가젤레 소수 류딘디 되네기 제 배시 땅나 땅에 유디배 니베티니 켜봐줘 자치 뭐 휴진 바디 하고야기 donala tshike ko jesa dine sam na jang de za chenbo da ye chenbo yin ba da ha go tu ko re jesa dine yin za social yang lu din dine ji ya se be ge da social ne bo bo ge ya ge da ji ge shunba lo ma shunba so so bo bo ge o deng yi lu din de ya din dine ji nyam na ga re chen na je tu ge din kya ba ji yu a sa be ge so so na bo bo ge ya ge on du sin ne sung go re.
This is such an important topic for everyone to reflect on, because what we have, we don't recognize. On one hand, we take so much for granted, but on another hand, on looking at it from another perspective, we also have a feeling of being quite limited, of being quite inadequate, often comparing ourselves to others, taking in a lot of negative criticism and comments that we've heard over our life, we feel unduly restrained. And this really, from the perspective of the Dharma, is a great shame. Because this incredible capacity that we all possess largely goes unused. And especially for those of us who have an interest in the Dharma, the full capacity, the full potential of a human life is available for all of us. There is no one who cannot achieve remarkable things with their mind in whatever remains of this life. This is a capacity that with full human intelligence, every being can achieve, every human being can achieve. So I really encourage you to reflect on what's being presented in this class, because it is not how people go through their lives, especially those who are troubled with depression. But even those who do not have such a burden, people largely feel that their capacity is quite limited. They feel quite small. But this is a deep a misapprehension of reality. So compare yourselves to animals. Compare yourself to the situation amongst the vast majority of human beings. And see how different things are for you. In particular then, thinking about your intelligence and what can be achieved with it in terms of understanding the Dharma and thereby accumulating the causes for liberation and enlightenment, which is possible with this body. So the purpose of this meditation is twofold. One is to bring a deep inner confidence through recognizing how remarkable the potential is that we hold. And then secondly, to focus on what is truly meaningful, so that we don't waste this potential, because we do have things in our lives that we value and that we see are precious, not just in terms of value, but are of great use and dear to us. Those we guard well and we utilize well. And when we recognize our human life marked with this incredible intelligence, and our entirety of liberties and endowments, we will not let them go to waste by being distracted by the meaningless, but will focus on what has great purpose. So this is why we need to concentrate on this meditation.
Nieka sidida bene tobiage kale khawores dadedi tore maobane gidi na dene tobiage tuguri besne tobi ngeba yomares ni dene toye kale khawores kale khawo imi gimje garelana nga jugi dene lüdin tobadi gyudan gen la dene yungurmado gyudan gen ga me bala an topsugo yomare gyudan gen la dene yungore 제자다 gyudan gen la dene yungobaza nga jugi denjugi milü tobiage gyudan gendi 사야디 규주비야디 갈래 하고 차려래. 세상 규주비야 갈래 하고 있는 디제부 안에 가서 던지울리딘디 야야 갈래 하고로 규야고 말도나 규야고면나 제부 용 말아. 진짜 규주비야디 갈래 가서 던지울리딘디 야시야시 토그리베스는 디 토야게 갈래 하고 그래서 니 하고 그래서 인비 김자 가래서는 니 토야게 규디 사야래 갈래 하고 그래서
So this life that we have achieved is found but once, which we come to recognize by seeing how few beings have a life where the potential is what ours is. So this way we come to recognize how very rare it is. And not only is it rare, it is also exceedingly difficult to obtain. And the reason that it's so difficult to obtain is due to the causes that have to be accumulated to lead to a rebirth such as this. So just like in our regular life, things that are very useful but are rare, they are seen as precious. And where something is useful but rare, the causes that are required to bring about this, whatever it is that's useful, those are difficult to gather, hence it is rare. And for this reason, something useful but rare is seen as precious. By reflecting on how difficult it is to accumulate the causes fully to achieve a rebirth like we have, this will aid our coming to see this life and its potential as precious, as valuable.
That is said earlier that did in the Tachmunada, Cheka Chemoduna, Jama de la Tachmucha de la Jigroasamna, Chesan Jama de Ragim Kalehapures, Nekapures, Rakapures. You do your Kalekapo in Mugimzagas and the Danjum Lutobiagi, leading you side, Luju the Mietumbi, Surimso at the Guri, Surimsungo, whatever, Surimsung, and the Jimbala, so what draws is the Jimbada, and the Servo Combata, Zunjizamba. And the Molam Jawar, Molam Jimba, some Jawas, the Negi, dance over the New Horses, Molam Jaw, the Negi, Nieju de Sudim Song, Jimbe Yamlenje, Sebe Yamlenje, and the Zundri Yamlenda, and Yamlenje, the Molam Jab, the Negi, Sankor. Just this how the Galakawa, then also Sudim Salamsa, the Chike, Galakawa Chagor, the Neza, the Gudi Saya Galakawa, yes, just and dig you Saya the Galakawanza, then Jimmy Lutoya. Tobia Gudi and Gudi Mena, Tivo and Jumil Young Marwa, Tenza, the Gudi side like Kalehabo was, Kalehabo Inza, and the Tivo, then Jumil Toyade, Yakapo, Yasi, Toyade, Kalekapo, as well.
These additional points that it's found but once and is difficult to obtain need to be reflected on because it's all too easy to take this life for granted. Even if you recognize what can be achieved with it, one can take it for granted thinking, oh, next life, I'll make some aspiration, next life I'll do it. This is a grave mistake. So not to take it for granted, to come to recognize that it will be difficult to achieve a rebirth as perfect as this one, again, we need to reflect on the causes that all need to be accumulated so as to have an opportunity as good as the one we have. Those causes, there are 5. The first is that of ethical restraint, the second is that of generosity, the third is patience, the fourth is joyous perseverance, and the fifth is prayers. All 5 of these need to be accumulated well so as to achieve an excellent rebirth such as we have. By recognizing what each of these causes entails, we come to recognize that to accumulate those causes is difficult. Hence, there is no certainty that a rebirth as good as this one will be achieved in our next life.
다 야네 야노 니에가 보이나 디링아 루딘 캬바치 톱도 요래 제자다 네 아니 다데데 직도 기우라체 안나 모바나 로하시기 제일야 안에 지게 냠내제디 지긴 선비게 삼다웨나 디안디고 말레스 다다체고 말레스 제자 로 몽부 가제베 뒤기베 가서 하고요 말 뉴르도 지비 수시와 니에가 뉴르도 지비 술세 뉴르도 지비기 지나주게 게디시 하고요 말았어. 당아주디 게시 가주기 되버나 로잘하스 되기です. 안당한 로잘하스 되버나 간주 게디 바도 되게 로잘하스 된데 되게 별나 하고요 말았어. 제상 안주리 게임 망고 쉬울 망아주기 아주 시열이야 친앙이 게임 망고 쉬우차요래서. 제상 고진 되었으나就是말은 시쇼쇼로지 빨아주기 소차데 레로우슈로 차되어서 제상 긴들 가서 온거는 아주기 지게 출로비 돈에게 중앙 투배 출로비 연구를 안 사용이게 안 내염이게 안 지금 마주게 아야지 소속이 지게 바 답변다 되는게 돈에게 되는 칼라자다 마디비게 안 지금 예다 마디비게 아 출로 준다 동사 마디비게 이제 제모제나 제다 마디비게 이제 되는게 시조에게 뺑아줄에 시에게 끼는데 망고시고래서 제가 아주게 다데나 니에가와데 깔 되는게 된다 치고 기에치고 휴징아도 자치고 유대바디 다데는 아주 제마 롱이제 제마디와 지긴섬데 마셔봐지 다데는 고프라디오 아주 냠네 제어야디 계치무슈레 다데는 마제바이나 아네 로주랑기 로니슈게 제레 지긴 삼바 되바이나 아네 지기 로니슈 제라 제야 고가 planet 야보레데 양직 바라데 징안 체지 시송반나 아는 아주 제야 말아 공경시우라고 진짜 다디는 아주 강투도 냠는 제바이나 아니 교회 말아 진짜 디제고 계신분이에서다 냐가 뉴도 지라스 데니기 술도네서 데니기 니수디기 파 세부하고 그래서 데니기 안 하고 저고 그래서 그래.
In our second line, several points of analysis, points to be meditated on, analyzed, are presented. The first is that this life is found but once. In other words, it's very rare, that it's difficult to obtain. In other words, because of all the causes that need to be accumulated properly, it is difficult to obtain. And then thirdly, that this life is easily lost. So this is the third key point in this line that needs to be reflected on again and again. So everyone here recognizes death will come, we will all die. By me saying this is not news to anyone. But what we do not recognize is that the time of death is uncertain. Again, intellectually, everyone will agree with that. No one can give the date and time of their death or the manner of their death. But we don't live with that knowledge. Rather, we live with the false apprehension of, I have an expanse of time before me. In fact, if we really look, the belief is, I have an extensive expanse of time before me. And the grave danger of this delusion is that it has a companion, which is, well, I'm busy now. I really don't have spare time. I have work commitments, and I have family commitments, and I have social commitments, and between those three, my time and energy is filled. So therefore, the Dharma is important. My life has tremendous potential, but in a few years' time, or in a retreat in the coming months. And we delay, and we procrastinate. And in this way, our life passes, and unexpectedly death comes. None of us can say for certain when we'll die. There's an average life expectancy in our country to the mid-80s, but no one can say for certain where we will fall on that side of average. None of us can say for certain whether we will live out the lifespan of our parents or not, nor the quality of the years that probably lie before us. And what should make it very clear to us in meditation is when we reflect on how few reasons there are for sustaining life. We know we need to eat nutritious food, and we need to exercise, and we need to take certain precautions to keep ourselves safe. But that's kind of it. The rest is beyond our control. We see regularly people dying unexpectedly from accidents and certainly from illness. This has been so evident, so visible in the last few years. And moreover, even activities we engage in to sustain our life can lead to unexpected death. People may eat something and get sick from it or choke from it and die. People engage in activities they do for good health, such as exercise or sports for fun, and have an accident, and either they die or they become disabled. So these things, whilst not common, they happen. And we have no certainty when this life will end. So these two parts of the meditation, coming to recognize the great value of this life and our incredible potential, but that it is finite, and that the end of this life could come at any time. When you bring these two together, the result is, I need to apply myself to the Dharma in order to accumulate the causes for good rebirths and spiritual development. And I need to do so right now. I cannot delay any further. So much of this life has passed, and I do not know what lies before me, how much time I have, nor the quality of my health. And the outcome then of these reflections is that we firstly come to recognize what we've achieved, what we've attained. And secondly, we do not take it for granted, but rather we put what remains of this life to the best possible use.
지금 류디마 기지기지기지 지루고 그랬어. 제상한도 기지기지 교화도 그랬어. 제상한도 현주 류 현주 겁리야 수고티게 양보 한 삼르티게 양세 때땅 투야다. 배야 보인 거로 봐. 되네마 마마지든 로마 지 경고라 차요도 너 수부 뉴슈티게 봐 슈크테지 샤라메디게 너 룽디게 야고티 지금마도 내 잠바팀보 메딩에 쳐도 제상 마 로침보 차데 되네게 아니 지게 곰 냠len 삼마 직제와 삼나야 수부기 제마도 지르팅게 다다 제마도 봐 아니 지게 되니게 삼노던에 잠바 다다메 되게 제마도 연구레스 제가 되네서 최정부 대비 온다베네 아당아 제마 지긴 선샤반다 되네 리딩이 토네 아니 가 교화조도 기지기지 교화조도 리딩 바니바니 바바 체도 아니 거 냠len 제알레 다다야 고치 투 말레스 되네 인자 아저 다당 저기라 리딩 수부 당보다 안에서 잠바도 템보 요바다 되네 고급 유리급라 다든 파냠len 제고레스 디슨 거 제가 치와 치비게 겐 몽부요레스 아니 기지싱해 봐요 말에 아니 그지 마치고로 야스되어베이네 기지기지 교화 친지 수부디파 교화시는데 곰 냠len 지기스나 수부기 마켜봐제 안도스 냠len 지도야 가보래 제산디네다 다데나 저기 마시와 초위 내가 수부 탕보 예비 내가 되네기 잠바다 되네기 템보 예비 내가 될량 저기 다 냠len 제고도 계침보래서 제산 숨어래
Even if we do live a long life, perhaps to 100 years, what we need to reflect on here is that our body changes momentarily. This isn't something that's so obvious to us. We don't really live with this understanding, but we know from science this is true. And we know from our own observation that this body changes. We can all compare ourselves to when we were young, and how different our body felt then, how different our energy was then, how much more supple and stronger we were, and how quickly we recovered from physical difficulties. Also how different our mind was, how easy it was to learn, how easy it was to develop skills. We've seen that change, and we know the direction it's heading in. It's not going to get easier. And the truth is, by the time one is quite advanced in years, if one hasn't developed a good meditation habit and good experience in meditation, developed some experience of the varying topics, it will be difficult to newly develop those. So therefore, we need to utilize these good years that we hopefully have before us, utilize them well, develop habituation or familiarization to these topics, so that when our memory is not as good as it is now, we have deep-seated imprints from this life that we can call on, keep our mind virtuous, continue to accumulate merit. So here, in this part of the reflection, we come to recognize this process of change that we've observed and recognize the direction of travel. So that even if we do have years ahead of us, that our current physical condition and mental condition is probably likely to be as good as it's going to get. We think like this so as to encourage us to use what remains of this life, particularly these better years that hopefully lie before us, to use them well.
and Rangla that you about Sang, and the negata, this way near Gawa Yimba, and then G Lawa Yimba, Gichi Chibi, and Tsutiki, do the some dance, do some dance, Jeva Chedu, and this way, and then Zachimbo Yimba, and Jig near Gawa Yimba, knew the Jiglawa Yimba, how go over the Ezra, Donia. They have gone and Garjo, the Garjo Relana, the maid city, Miyawa, the Nani Bolember, Jingulo, that the maid city, Miyawa, said, then I do not Chunjuji, said Dizamgi, and the Lagalajan, Gordy Corche, and Ajuki, Chuin Yam Majavati, Jigo Maresor, the maid city, Miyawa, said, that don't have us in the Dangan, don't that Chimbo Mayan, but said Dizamgi, Jawa Janja, Digi, Kadunga, and Digi to said Dizamgi, Janja, some Jen and Yam Church of Yam, Della Yang Jia, do sit up and the Chun Yam Jago Pragmare, Chun Yam Jago Marina, and Jawa Chimata, Tarbatum Jimoko was at it, the two marches at Chimbo, the Lutin, the Lepage down to go Martineza, said Dizamgi, Sayatoya down, and said Dizamgi, some layer, Cohort Madubache, and Miawar, Dending Bolembersin, Denda Dembi, Denda Demba, Jawa Chima. The Lutin Yaboyada, and Tarbata, Tamji Kimbo one Toya, and Tarbico one Toya, Tamji Kimbo one Toyagi, Ditoya Gudi Pa, Dena Dembares, so that the Gudi Yamnejo, Nimbodi Pa, Yamnejo, the Kichimbores, on those in the dead, Jogores, some more.
The second line of the Tibetan concludes with something we have in the first line, to realize how. What has been realized then, or understood well, are these four general topics that have been covered thus far. So firstly, recognizing the freedoms or liberties and endowments that we have attained, and thereby the incredible potential that we have to transform our minds, to ease the suffering that we experience and help others to do the same too, and take great strides to achieving liberation and enlightenment itself. This is the potential that we all possess. So that was the first point. The second, though, is that this is incredibly rare. It's found but once, which emphasizes its great rarity, and we recognize this through what we observe, how few humans have this potential because they lack interest in the Dharma. And certainly animals do not. And then thirdly, that it is difficult to obtain because the 5 causes have to be accumulated and accumulated well. And that it's easily lost is the fourth point, which is that it momentarily changes. And that we need to recognize this clearly so that it has a transformative impact on us. So these are the 4 points that need to be realized. Then moving into the next line, which for us is the 4th line, undistracted by the meaningless affairs of this life. So here we look at where so much of our time thus far has gone, in particular what we are thinking about, so where our mental energy has gone, and come to recognize that some of it we have to engage in because we need to sustain this life. We need to accumulate the essentials for life. So this is needed. But the vast majority of our time is taken up with mental energy and physical energy, where we are thinking about gaining delights and enjoyments for this one life, or perhaps for the day, or just the moment. And in this way, we have spent so much of our life not just focused on gathering the essentials, but rather overwhelmed by the delights of the world, or the marvels of this world. And now, through what we've recognized up to this point in this meditation, we can then come to see that largely where our mental focus has been on such things and not on gathering the causes for liberation and enlightenment. As we go about our daily life, we are largely consumed with meaningless affairs. In other words, on thinking about the problems of the day and the things we'd like to experience today. Things of no great value. And what we are forgetting about is to have a mind that is on the causes that would lead to liberation, a mind on the causes that would lead to enlightenment. And those are what we have in our third line, the essence of making this life worthwhile.
저게 체디기 류딘디 다 줍차로와 그 냐마기 규사시엔 다 줍차래. 그래서 당한 저 체들의 롱주에디기네 아주 규디 냐마나 체 냐마 사사바랑 체디기에 류딘사다 산 줍차와래. 규사네다 당한 저게 체들이야 안에 가서는 당한 저 내가 돼서 내가 저기네 맞이 숨고 말해. 내가 돼서 제고로와 이내다 저게 내가 돼서 제반자 제고고데 이내 제디 장장게 내가 삼단지 치마 삼마다베나 개와 치마기 용야기 아니 지게 치마 용야다 아니 탈바 탐지기 보고 와도 귀디 마사바이나 녀마사 자기도 조사바래 난 사바사메나 안 마오바나 약보도 용야메 규메버다 지부용하면 진짜 강아태야래 그래 진짜 당한 저기네 저로 진변한 저기 지게 다와 니메 다와 딜이야 사기 귀긴디게 냐마 다와 진열 줍차로와 디지데도 다 다와 제마 사기 귀긴데 다와디 레갈레샤 사진도신 안제게 무주고로와 제사 냐마 사사데 사사제 다드되전 레가말레되나 아니 다와 제마 사야 무라그마로와 어디나시 다 저게 다대간도 류딘데 가두고는 균야마사 줍차와레스 다정아저 롱주에게 규심바 사요레 이나 다대간저 레가레 겐지 태전도신에 레가제 레고고디나 마옴바나 야고용의 규디 마데 다데나 마사바이나 녀마사 규디 조살 차제원 민찰 데 마옴바나 제본 야고디 용토 마데 제산 다데나 사고레 사 юм전지 생고레.
This life that we have all achieved, this precious human rebirth, has come about independent on causes. Those causes we ourselves accumulated in the past, which means we can recognize we have the capacity to accumulate them again. And we must accumulate them again. Because all that we are experiencing in this life, which has of course come from causes, those causes are exhausted. And if we don't accumulate similar causes again, our future lives will be more difficult. We can liken it if at home the fridge is bare, we know we need to go shopping, otherwise we're going to have nothing to eat. So the store of virtue that led to this rebirth, that virtue is exhausted. So we need to be sure that our merit is amply restocked so that our future lives are at least have at least similar favorable circumstances as this life.
지난 된데님 볼렘버 진기로서 된다 된바님 볼레데 가르스는 저기 수림소야 되게 되셔버데 수림소야 안에 진변냠내자 서버콤야 전지 좀 안에 몰람대야라 소바 그래서 안에 이제 된다 된바 냠내지다 림바직디래 다 되네게 다 디강래야 된다 된바 탈바 된다 된바 탈비교고 방토야래네 녀종kom야 덴디가래야 안에 지금 저기 다 진바 수련서버 전주 되게도 여여바지 디가라네 삼된다 다음에 봐도 베시라고 봐 고메야 데수고메야지 된다 된배 냠내지 지게 다 되네 숨바디 가래 용어서네 되네 대신하지 추림다 안진바 수련서버 전주 삼대 시라 공고하데 디가래 잠니제 자주심 냠내자 되네기 림바체 냠내자 된다든배 산교고 방토야 되는 냠내자 지상 된다든배 냠내자 디소래 지상.
What we have in our third line, making it worthwhile. So this then refers to fulfilling our potential, accumulating the causes so as to ensure our future lives go well. So here we look at this in three ways. The first is to recognize at the very least we need to ensure a good rebirth in our future life. rebirth at least as good as this. So we need to accumulate those five causes. The fifth was prayer. And the first four are essential, and they are included in each of these three ways that we come to understand what a worthwhile life entails. So the first is ethical restraint, the second is generosity, the third is patience, and the fourth is joyous perseverance. These are required with prayer so as to ensure a good rebirth. But to make this life far more worthwhile than even that, going beyond the accumulation of causes for good rebirth, but also accumulating the causes to attain liberation from suffering in its entirety, in addition to those four causes, one also needs to accumulate concentration and wisdom, making 6. And the third aspect of a worthwhile life, or a meaningful life, is to take this understanding and apply it to the situation of others, recognizing the dire situation others are in not having come to recognize the great potential of their life, nor living a life of great meaning, accumulating causes, despite desiring the results that would otherwise come. And in this way, generating love for them and compassion, generating that further into bodhicitta itself. And thereby, those causes of love and compassion and bodhicitta being conjoined with the other 6 of generosity, ethical restraint, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration and wisdom, we now have the full set of causes for enlightenment. This is how we live a meaningful or worthwhile life.
안도 도시는 순고를 다 네가 수금 냠는 체대 카르레 냠는 체대 삼다데 대시셰바나지레 양안주기 아주 류딘디 단주미류인 버체 자 치무인비 금천 삼다 현유류딘의 둘째 금천 삼다 삼제바제 된정안주기 류딘데 자 치무인 바다 시국직 계치무인 바다 하고 와제 안된텔이야 타바다 탐제 기복고 바타 자 톱투이 된 자치무인 바 하고 데니시에도와 선배기 데니 제바제 돼서 하고 와제 데네 아는 제사다 데니기 야체 니에가와 임바 아니 지라와 임바 두세 삼다제 두세 삼다네 데니기 삼다 데니레도와 선배 하고 차네 하고네 데니 아주 가르쳐 왔으나 다게 체텔이야 안지기야 이지게 체디게 장에 자와 점 지양 마디오바제 안 대치게 되는 닝보 렘바되지 닝보 렘 냠는데 냠는 약보 지기야 선배기 더 둠버자 되래 뭐바게 당에 지기 선배기 되니게 냠는 약보 용토와 지기 선배기 렘버 진유로 생각 두세 둠버게제 되니게 냠는 약보 지기 되니게 제 투여래야 라미기 알이야 진이라버지 해서지 도시 라마리아 진라 진로로 진로업세데 다가제 도시는 나 디가서 삼다에 디레 대죄니가 와다 삼다다 네 지게 도시는 삼다 치와 미다와 고미야디 디레 디니게 삼다제 디니게 삼다쟁이 돈달라 디니게 삼다에 제를 당이 덴델이야 디니게 토비베델이야 최 넘버다고 지기야 선비게 냠내 야고시 선비 뭐봐 듬바디 파지기 선비 삼로도 야네 야노 삼다 디니게 냠내 야고 제발라 아니 지나게 빠체 모여 달라미게 아니 라미 진이라버시 해야죠 온도신의 고미야리 당도
The verse concludes with what we have at the beginning, please bless me. So here we have gone through in this meditation, reflecting on this precious human rebirth that is so precious, not merely because it's a human rebirth, but because it's marked with the 18 freedoms and endowments, or liberties and endowments. So there we reflected, generating the first key point of this meditation, which is to recognize the potential that we have achieved with this life. And that this potential is incredibly rare but valuable. It's found but once and is difficult to obtain. So this first part of the meditation is so important to overcome this feeling of inadequacy that is so pervasive in society, this feeling of being quite small, of having very limited potential. Whereas when seen with wisdom, seen from a true perspective, we are all remarkable people, remarkable beings, in that we have this capacity that is untapped, unutilized, but is completely obtainable for us. It's not hidden, it's not far away, it's just here within our mind. So this is the first key point. The second then is that is easily lost. And here this reminds us of that not only is death certain, but the time and the manner is uncertain. And it's not just that death will come, it's that our life is deteriorating. Our mental capacity, our physical capacity is deteriorating. Therefore, there isn't time to waste. We need to look at what we prioritize. We need to look at, do we really need to put the physical energy and the mental energy into the wide variety of activities that we do? We need to look at our priorities and include the Dharma there in a way where it is far more dominant than perhaps it has been thus far. Because in this way, we can make this life more worthwhile or meaningful by focusing our mind on accumulating the causes that will lead to good rebirths, liberation, and enlightenment. This is essential. This is how we partake of the essence of this life. But to do so, we have to overcome our distraction to meaningless affairs, things that have no great value, nothing beyond really the immediate impact in this life. So this is then the third key point, which follows from the first two. It is about changing our focus, changing what we value. And that brings us then to the conclusion of the verse, which for us is at the beginning. We're now having given rise to determination to transform our lives, transform our minds, fulfill our potential. We turn to our Lama and request his blessings or inspiration, so that through opening ourselves to his teachings and guidance and thereby and inspiration, we can overcome all obstacles that we have, in particular in developing this way of thinking. To the extent we have generated this aspiration, we know from our experience it does fade, so therefore this is an obstacle. Here we make requests. Inspire me, continue to inspire me, so that when this aspiration, this determination wanes, that I can readily recognize that and reinvigorate it, and thereby overcome this and other obstacles and live a life of great meaning, fulfill my potential.
And then that the nimble liberty you lost in Ibole, Carrella, Kivu Chunga, Tumo, Lamirim Banyam Jeda, Kivu Tinda, Tumo, Lamirim Banyam Jeda. That Kivu Chimbo, that Tumo, Lamirim Banyam, Kivu Chimbo, because a Kivu Chimbu, Lamirim Banyam Jeda. Then a Sanatory Lamirim Banyam Jeda, that the nimble egg it is that is my immersion jail my share. That is the nimble lingy insipid Meva Tubakim, Meva Kia, the Shigurua, that in my Yamsing Rimbatie, that Tambo do slam at the City said, then my rimbash in the area.
The final line in the Tibetan is literally, partake of its essence, make it, or rather this way around, make it meaningful rather than worthwhile, make it meaningful, partake of its essence, and please bless me to do so. So this is how the verse concludes. And the meaning of making it worthwhile or meaningful, and as well as partaking of its essence, is, and thereby what we are turning to our Lama for blessings about, is in relation to attaining skill and transformation of all the trainings shared with a practitioner of initial capacity, all the trainings shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity, and all the trainings of a practitioner shared with all the trainings of a practitioner of supreme capacity, including those of the Vajrayana. So these then are presented from the very next verse up to, I think it's 114. All of those trainings now follow. And this then is setting the foundation combined with the previous verse so that we can cultivate all of these within ourselves. So thank you, and we'll conclude here for this week. Thank you very much.